Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's performance will feature death threats, edible arrangements, and a deep dive into one of the most contentious fonts ever designed. It's Papyrus with guest Chris Costello, beginning now on Created Things. Welcome to Created Things, a podcast of Catholic creatives, and the only program where it's equally likely that when you hear the word serif, we could be talking about an angel or the doohickey on a piece of type. I am your host, artist and psychotherapist Jacob Flores Popchek. With me, as ever, is my good and excellent friend, priest and Dominican friar, Father Gabriel Torretta. How are you doing today, Father?
Hey ho. I wonder if I should start insisting that we change my introduction beyond Dominican priest and what have you to be like, I think not everyone knows that I am technically speaking what you call a theological beautician. And I just think this is an important part. This is an important part of my identity, and it's something that I think everyone needs to know about, because I just figure I have gone to all this effort of going to theological beauty school and not thereby dropping out. And I just feel like everyone needs to know that, when you have theological beauty needs, I am here for you.
I would be okay telling that or including that in your introduction. My problem, though, is it tempts me to want to encourage you to stop pursuing your degrees, that we can call you a theological beauty school dropout.
I know.
Funnier and
this is the thing. This is the worst part, is that it basically by adopting this persona of the theological beautician, it does mean that by definition I have to drop out just so that I have a title song and my own knockoff theological version of Grease, which is in post-production I wouldn't worry about. It's just a big thing. Nothing to worry about.
One of the many truly god-awful projects you're doing, which will never see the light of day.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for. Yeah, that's what I'm here for. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's like a graveyard of terrible ideas. That's my heart.
Oh, boy. Well, that might be the case, these terrible ideas. What is not a terrible idea, though, is our idea to have a gentleman on our podcast for an interview that I've been very, very excited for quite some time. As I want to cue this up here, but, Father, you're of course familiar with that sort of swoopy, ancient looking, calligraphy-esque text that will be all over the church bulletin in your parish, which will be all over the kebab restaurant for some reason, which will be the funnest text when you install Microsoft Word on your computer. This is a ubiquitous thing. It is a really fun thing. It is also a perhaps unfairly often mocked thing. But like any piece of art, it was created by a person. And I'm so excited to welcome that person to our program today. With us, artist, illustrator, graphic designer. He's done everything from create fonts in your computers, like I said, to creating the quarters in your pocket. Please welcome to the program, Chris Costello. How you doing, Chris?
Very good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
We're so excited to have you on.
Same here.
We're so excited to have you on. So let's just start off with getting a little bit about you and your design background. Like I said in your intro there, you've done everything from create fonts to build out coins for the U.S. Mint. You have a very prolific and varied career. Tell us about your kind of artistic journey to this point.
Yeah. It started out way back. Actually, in probably my first commissioned job was I painted all the signs on the home run fence of our Little League field. I think I was maybe 10 years old. Yeah. My father was a very, very strong influence in my career direction, and he got me that job because he had, known people in the town. So I made $70. I think I made $7 per sign, and painted them all. He actually taught me lettering. He taught me how to paint signs because he was a sign painter as well, and a graphic designer. So that was kind of the beginning. I was really excited. I was really when they were put up on the little league field. There was the field was in my elementary school, so I was like the famous guy who painted all those billboards, and so I was quite the celebrity. I know that I think about it. But yeah, it was his influence really. I wanted to be a musician as well, and for a time I was, and I was trying to figure, should I go to Berklee College of Music or should I go to art school? And all along, I was talking to my father because he was a commercial artist. He worked for IBM as a graphic designer, and he pretty much convinced me to go the route of graphic design. You can make some solid money in that career, and that was pretty much I just followed his direction. So yeah, I went to school, a couple different schools. I was in a community college in a Dutchess Community College, which is an excellent art curriculum in the Hudson Valley, Poughkeepsie, New York. Got a job at a graphic design studio while I was in school. It was kind of like interning there for a while. Then left school, worked full time as a kind of a junior designer. Did that for 3 years. Then went off on tour with a band, and I quit my job and just kind of shifted back to music. Did that for a while. Then I decided when the tour was done, we ended up kind of not disbanding, but we did a couple gigs locally in New York, upstate New York. And then I decided I wanted to go back to school for graphic design to finish out my degree because I was in a 2-year program. So I went down to Florida. I'm trying to make it short. I know it's kind of a long kind of journey here, but I went to the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale, and paid my way for 9 months, and I ran out of money, so I wanted to figure, all right, let me just take some time off. I'll get a job and then go back to school and finish up. I got a great job at an ad agency down in Pompano Beach, Florida. They hired me, and I learned so much just being there, working with art directors, creative directors, and the whole production team. As a designer, a comping artist, just got the whole feel of what the business is all about, that I decided, man, this is great. I've learned more in a month, I think, than I could probably learn in school. You know how that goes. Mm-hmm. So I actually never went back to the Art Institute, but I ended up working at this ad agency called Group 3 Advertising. Then after a couple of years there, I went freelance, and that was really, really great as well. I think for a couple of years I was doing it on my own, working for a number of agencies in Miami. And then I decided to, actually, another side project was that the Papyrus thing happened when I was working at that ad agency. I forgot. I know this is what we're talking about here, but on the downtimes with when I was working at the ad agency, I was kind of like, retainer. I mean, it was full time, but they kept a staff of artists even during the slow periods. And during those slow periods, I just created, and I explored calligraphy and illustration. I did drawings. I did all kinds of things because I had to be in the office 9 hours, 8 hours a day. So. And one of the things I kind of began to develop was I was playing around with this calligraphy idea. And again, it was where it was going with a lot of the doodles were happening is because at the same time I was beginning to, I was seeking God. I was trying to deepen my relationship with God, studying the Bible more, getting into, and with that kind of in my mind, I was thinking of Jesus Christ, Middle East, scriptures, and I was writing entire phrases of scripture with the font. I was labeling cities in the Middle East. And that just kind of it just exploded. It's like, this looks really cool. I should probably do something with it. So, I mean, we can get into that story later, but to continuing the journey, that's where Papyrus started. And, but I was in Florida for a while. Then I decided I'd like to get back closer to home. So I moved back to Boston to be a little bit more closer to my family and some friends that I had in Boston. And that's where I am now. But I worked for ad agencies in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Did some freelance work for some Boston agencies, and a lot of. I mean, I got a full-time job at an ad agency for about two years. Then I got back into the band thing. I shifted away from art and did music, and I joined a couple of bands, and one in particular, we were, did a lot of original material, and I was hoping to kind of make it with that group. At the same time, I was exploring illustration. So I got into doing a lot of my pen and ink drawings, which you might see a lot of those on my website. I started doing work for textbook illustrator or textbook companies, mostly here in Boston. There were a lot of them. There's a Houghton Mifflin company. She actually did work for Scholastic in New York, some agencies in Chicago, and all these were like book illustrations. So I did a lot of that stuff and calligraphy work. I did some book titles and typography. And then I veered into a lot of different things. I got into web design. I got into animation and flash animation when that was big. And then probably the most recent thing was the coin design, coin and metal design, which is something that I just kind of I just discovered that the U.S. Mint was looking for artists, citizen artists, not necessarily full-time staff. They wanted to pull from creative sources just in the general population. And I applied. First time I applied in 2004, and I did not get in to the program. They were kind of establishing a pool of artists to work with. But I was not deterred. I figured, well, if I don't make it now, I'm going to go for it the next time. So 7 years later, there was another call, and I resubmitted my work and some new work. And that time I was actually accepted into the program, which is called the Artistic Infusion Program. They wanted to get some kind of new energy, new ideas into the group, and that's what I've been doing. Kind of again, contract work along with other illustration work. But I started doing coin and metal design in 2010 with the U.S. Mint. Had my first coin minted in 2013, and then I've been contracting with the Mint ever since. And I actually started working with the Royal Mint as well. I do some work with contracting with the Mint in UK, and I've done a couple of coins for the UK, and that's where I am now. I'm also I'm still working full time as a graphic designer. I work for the a nonprofit organization called the Trustees, which is a Massachusetts organization that is involved with cultural preservation, cultural historic preservation, recreation, and farming actually, and it's an organization that's really trying to preserve a lot of real estate, a lot of areas in the state to keep from development, and to just provide just pristine places for people to visit and to experience. So I do a lot of the design work, magazine design, and some web-related work, signage, wayfinding. So that's what I do now. Coin design, illustration, typography, whatever the call is at this point. I think seems like I've seen it all. So, and I think the coolest thing too, though, is everything that I've learned, in whether it's typography, design, composition. It's all kind of came together to help me do the best that I can as a coin designer. I think I'm using all those skills that I've learned to kind of pull it together as a designer of coins and metals. It's really interesting because that type of art requires everything: typography skills, layout skills, illustration skills, composition. So I'm thankful, and I'm blessed. I feel like I am in a place right now that it's kind of a dream situation, and I'm very thankful to God for making all of this happen. Because it's not just me. It's like I who gives me the power to use my hands and do what I do comes from God. So I'm very thankful for where I sit right now.
It's amazing.
So, yeah.
There's it's interesting. So I'm a historian, especially like a church historian, mostly a medievalist, but I do stuff in some earlier periods too. And especially like early Christian antiquity, there's always these questions people get so wrought up about coinage, believe it or not. You probably know a lot about this, but people just get really wrought up about coinage. That there's this coin that Constantine releases in like 313, and it has this, and it seems like it has the Cairo, the first two letters of Christ's name in Greek on his helmet. And when you see it blown up in a textbook or on the internet or whatever, it's like, oh my gosh, that's a Cairo. This is like a very profound statement that like he's a Christian now, and like he's going to make the empire Christian and all this kind of stuff. But then of course, like if you see the image, if you see the coin in real life, that little thing that we think is a Cairo on his helmet is like, it's like a fraction of a millimeter big, right? And so there's all these questions, which is like there's like just like how much of a big deal, like how much difference did this make in people's lives? Was this utterly transformative, a sign that nothing would ever be the same again, or was it sort of ho-hum? And I think like what's splendid about so the coin designs of yours that I've been able to see is that you see actually this like level of attention to detail, where now you know exactly, like you said, you're sort of bringing in all these different multiple media and art talents that you've built up over the course of the years, and you can see the way in which these are working. Of course, I have the privilege of seeing them blown up, right? So I can see some of the detail, but I did want to particularly highlight that one of the ones you were talking about for the Royal Mint, which is I encourage everybody to check this out on his website, chriscostello.design, which is there's this amazing H.G. Wells 2021 UK £2 coin. This is fantastic because it's the sort of the alien spaceship from the War of the Worlds, and then there's like this dandy 19th century gentleman's suit with a top hat, and of course there's nothing in between for the Invisible Man. And there's this like really nice, very like lovely detail about the way in which the swoop of the spaceship matches the circle of the inner silver ring of the coin, which then swoops down to the collar of the dandy 19th century gentleman's collar, and then the whole is sort of surmounted by these by a clock face, so that you get also the time machine sort of in it as well. And it's this wonderful sense of like attention to detail and sort of bringing everything out, and I guess I could just just to begin that sort of sense of like design and how you manage design, I wonder if you could just comment about like, there's more there than just a pastiche of like interesting visual elements from H.G. Wells' stories, right? Like here's this, it's creating a whole new visual language and a whole new visual design. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about like that process of composing an image, taking symbols that exist and turning them into a new visual language, sort of directing people's attention in a certain way, recognizing like the limitations of your own medium, that like when you're done, this is going to be again something so small in somebody's coin, in somebody's pocket, that will they notice it, won't they notice it, like how do you begin to make those kinds of design decisions?
That's a great question, because honestly, I'm kind of consistently and continually still learning about this. When I became a coin designer, like you said, I had no idea how it was done, and the fact that there are people behind the creative process. And as I learned the process, I thought this is just fascinating that I can actually participate in this. So working. I think one of the challenges is you're working with a circular canvas, a very small one as well, and yet in many cases we're kind of tasked with bringing a number of different visual ideas into some kind of iconic form that is recognizable instantly, and that is a huge challenge to try to pull in various things that say people want to see on a coin, I mean, the stakeholders and those involved in the actual process. It takes a lot of, I guess, discipline, a lot of sketching, a lot of taking a look at what works and what doesn't work. There's a lot of process of elimination, I'd have to say. A lot of my designs for coinage, I mean, they may never see the light of day because they although they seemed to solve one problem, they didn't really solve another, and it wasn't really quite what it needed to be, or it didn't quite work. But it was through that process you ultimately get to something that actually works. So yeah, I guess it's a thinking thing. I guess what it is really is I find a lot of my creative process happens while I'm at rest, or even whether I'm walking, or even just before I go to bed or sleep. It's like I seem to visualize things better when my eyes are closed, and I can actually begin to compose things and see things kind of come together as I'm, meditating or just quietly contemplating. So I do a lot of sketching in my head, actually, and a lot of these forms and shapes and typography and visuals, I just tend to see them before I actually bring pencil to paper, and it's like, oh, that looks cool. Like, yeah, I can see that, So I think a lot of it is just, and honestly, I probably need to be doing this more. When I first started, I was like praying before every design. It's just, God, just give me inspiration, something, because this is very difficult, and I don't even know where to begin. And so that, I mean, the inspiration, this is really a major part of the creative process, because it's, like a lot of these coin design concepts, there are so many different ideas, so many different directions: history, culture, people, military, civil rights, all the vast, story of American history, British history, culture. It's just every project is so different. So yeah, it's almost like this is, I can't do this alone. I've got to have some help, really. I just got to let the mind go, and things happen. I mean, not all my designs get chosen, but there's a number of artists that are incredibly talented that also contribute. But when I do get a design chosen, it's definitely an exciting. It seems like it's like the first time. It's like, oh wow, it happened again. It's like, wow, that's going to be a coin. So yeah, so it's yeah, just kind of listening to what I see, or watching what I see, and then once I just exercise the mind, then I just begin to bring it down on paper and have it come to fruition. So
that's really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And I did notice that I could hardly escape but noticing that in one of your 400th anniversary of the Mayflower coins, that you did deploy, rarely actually, for your own visual design, from what's on your portfolio, a sort of modified papyrus on that, so it sees sees a little bit of a display in some of at least one of the coin designs.
Yeah, actually, it was one of the medals. I figured this is an appropriate place for it. It was with part of the Native American story. So, and it worked. And I tried everything. So many different fonts, but it's like, and I was almost trying not to use papyrus because it is, can be overused or inappropriately used. But I decided this works. It works better than anything that I've tried. And there it was. So.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if we could we go back to that sort of genesis moment that you were talking about, where because this is you think about how a font, how a typeface gets made. There's lots of different. I mean, you might think couple of Swiss dudes, in a chalet somewhere, or you might think, 16th, 17th century men actually carving a piece of wood or forging a piece of metal or whatever. There's different processes by which one designs a typeface, but the sort of process that you have kind of very begun to outline for us is something that's really distinctive, and that I would love to hear a bit more about. So you've mentioned that this was sort of rose in some context of like thinking about the Bible, imagining something about this in your own spiritual experience or whatever. But I wonder if you wouldn't mind just whatever you want to share from that,
Sure.
whether the spiritual reality or just the whole context in which this thing came into being.
Yeah. I had paper. I had paper in front of me. I had all kinds of paper samples, and I pulled some with a lot of tooth on it. It was almost like a watercolor paper. And I've always been, I love, doodling, but when I get my calligraphy pens, that's a kind of a different level of doodling. It's like you just do a lot of, the Spencerian scripts, the swashes. It's something you can really have a lot of fun with. I honestly don't know where the alphabet came from. I think I was just, what it started out was, I was just writing names of cities in the Middle East, and I was thinking, almost like a little mix of Egyptian or Roman kind of culture. Something was in there. The idea of the hieroglyphics, and it was just the brush. The pen. I was just kind of letting the swashes go. It just seemed like it became very fluid and very natural and organic, the way, as I was determined that these are what the characters are going to be as I'm writing these words, and then I would step back from it, and I'm thinking, I like the way that E looks, and I like the way that A kind of it's got that higher bar. It's almost, or the crossbar is almost like on an angle, and I just began to explore, and I started out with all uppercase lettering. So in that sense, it was very Roman, very feathery, very light, and wispy. I developed a set of like these large initial caps that are kind of like almost like the illustrative biblical illuminated text, although not as complicated, like the large B, and then the smaller, whatever afterwards. So, so I had this large caps, small caps. It read very Roman. It was very stately. It was very, really cool. And I ultimately let me just play with some letters. So I started doing rows of A's, rows of B's, rows of C's. This is what I learned in calligraphy class to master each character. You do entire pages, rows of just the single character. So I was doing that alphabet, just from A to Z. Then I'd experiment with numbers, the numeric system. The numerals were beautiful. And I ended up putting it together like a small proposal. I figured, why don't I see if this can go anywhere? So I made a proposal. I put together the best, of the font. I would select the best character from every one of the characters in the alphabet, best numbers, punctuations. And I put a piece together and sent it out to typography distributors. Like at the time, there were, this is before digital fonts. There were, like companies like CompuGraphic, VeriTyper. These are companies that produced typography. It was digital, but it wasn't like desktop digital. It wasn't like available for everybody. It was they created font software that was commercial, and they distributed their own fonts as well. Let's see, ITC was the ITC Corporation was International Typeface Corporation was another one. I think I sent my alphabet to maybe 10 different companies, and I was rejected by every single one. because as they kept on coming back, the rejection letters kept on coming back to me saying it's too thin, it wouldn't hold up on a computer on computer films. The a lot of these typography at the time, I think it was like not linotype, but I'm not sure how the process was, but they would make a negative, an actual like a vinyl negative of the font, and it was like phototype, you know. Don't fully understand that process, but everybody got back to me and said, no, it's not going to work, except one company, and that was Letterpress. And they were a British company that produced you're probably familiar with the old press type, like transfer lettering, vinyl letters that you would rub off. And they were the ones that were very interested in it. But what they wanted me to do was develop a set of lowercase characters. They said that it's very wispy. We like the way it looks, but it would not hold up in their production process of making these transfer letters. So they asked me to thicken them up and do a set of lowercase characters for just be able to. It would be much more marketable if it had the full character set. So I did my same routine with everything I did with the capital letters. I did with the lowercase letters. Just started writing words, scriptures, word clouds, kind of in using a lot of lowercase letters. And I developed the lowercase thing where some of the ascenders or descenders are a little bit more extended, or maybe a little bit more elongated than normal. And I pulled together a lowercase font set that was comparable and compatible with the uppercase, and they looked good together. So I resubmitted. They took a look at it and approved that. They said, "Yeah, we'll take this on." So they paid me to develop. After we signed the agreement that they would have an exclusive ownership of the font and their distribution throughout the world. They had a worldwide reach. I figured. Again, I was 23 years old, so I thought it's like getting a record contract or movie deal or something like that. I felt, oh, really? It's amazing. So yeah, just out of college. So I spent the whole summer creating. The originals were it was lettered maybe half-inch high, a quarter-inch, half-inch high, just regular hand done, human size lettering. And then I ended up, the process was I took the individual characters that I wanted to use, blew them up to about 3-4 inches high, developed each character, prepared each letter to be reproduced on their end. I gave them a stack of hard copies of each individual letter, number, punctuation, and even some foreign characters were in there. And then they did everything they needed to do on their end, scanned it all, and made them into these press type sheets, the blue sheets. They had the blue vinyl with the black letters, and that was it. And so I've been able to just collect royalties off of that since its inception, 1984, I believe it was, when it all came together.
Wow, and we're still talking about it right now.
I know.
This design project you did on a whim.
I know.
In 84. I want to throw something in here. I wonder if you'll agree with this. There seems to be in your work, and this isn't solo to you. I mean, this is definitely the experience of like video editors I've talked to. Even some of the work, although probably the considerable minority of the work I've done, where there's this real juxtaposition between how hard you're working on something and its efficacy being based in how subtle and unnoticeable it is, right? Like I've talked to those movie editors and they're saying, like, if I do my job right, you don't even notice that I had a job, and in a similar way, you're designing a quarter that you of course would hope would catch someone's eye, but it's sort of made to be this subtle thing. Likewise, you're crafting these fonts over the, in the case of Papyrus, crafting these fonts over the course of 6 months and putting all this effort into the little, loops and the swooshes and all this stuff, and someone's just going and hammering it out on a typewriter and now a laptop, and there seems to be this crazy juxtaposition there. So I'd like you to speak to that, but then you have a weird experience too with Papyrus, where insofar as I think it's possible for a font to be a household name, Papyrus has become kind of a household name. It's sort of like Times New Roman. If anybody knows any fonts at all, they know Times New Roman, they know Papyrus, they know Comic Sans.
Comic Sans, yeah.
You know what I mean? And, so you have this career where, again, correct me if I'm wrong, you're putting all this detail into stuff that's ultimately kind of supposed to go unnoticed a little bit. And then suddenly this thing gets memeified in the broader zeitgeist.
Mm-hmm.
That just must have been crazy. Can you talk about both sides of that experience?
Yeah. Well, when I created it, I honestly, I had no idea that it would be used for everything. Yeah, everything. And it still is. And this is what I know causes a great deal of frustration with graphic designers. Because, no intention at all. When I was developing it, I was thinking there's a narrow scope of usage, again, it was either biblical, historical, medieval, even geographically, more Middle Eastern, Southern Europe, Roman. So I had no idea. It for me, my idea, it was a novelty font. It was just one of those things that, you only use it sparingly in appropriate spots. And when it went through the whole process of being produced, and again, you're right, the detail and the attention that is paid to every character, it was, it's kind of mind-blowing. Everything had to be, when you're doing type design, you're kind of designing within that confine of the box, and everything, the negative space is incredibly important. And the positioning of all the little nicks and things that seem to be random are actually strategic. There's balance, So yeah, there was a lot of that stuff that I guess it was just out of the love of the art that I really got into it, just something that was just coming out of me. So I love the focus on the detail there. And then when it was done, it was like, okay, great. I got this font that's to my name, and the catalogs came back with the 1984 releases of the new fonts from Letraset, and that was like so exciting. And they used the font in various, possible ways to use it. And again, it was in a historical context, and it was appropriate. And then it was out there, and it was on its way. And then I started seeing the font started turning up in. I saw it in, I believe it was a National Geographic. Very appropriately used for just one headline. I think it had something to do with Santa Fe and Native American culture. There was another like destination ad I saw in some other magazine. It started cropping up a little bit, so it was great to see it. It was cool because it's like rare. It was a rare appearance, and then all of a sudden, oh, there it is! Look at that. So that was the intent. I didn't mean for it to blow up. What happened was, and I was informed of this through I can't remember who owned the font at the time, but it had gone through a series of ownerships, and with the font, the type companies buying each other out, there were all kinds of different. I was just kind of contract holder in the background and seeing a lot of different mergers happening with the type distributors. But somewhere in I think it was the early 90s, I was told that the Papyrus is going to be included in the default font sets for all Microsoft and Mac computers. So it was part of their the default system font catalog. So it was a kind of a redoing and an updating of the contract, and I would be paid appropriately for this kind of broader reach. But when that was agreed upon, and Microsoft and Apple took it on, that was it. Once people scroll down, I don't know if you've seen that Avatar Saturday Night Live skit, but
we've seen
down,
it.
and boop, Papyrus. Oh, there's that artsy font. Let me use that one because it's so different. It's just it's unique. But I mean, you can't use it for everything. But like you said, I see it. And a lot of people see it everywhere. The yoga studios, the church bulletins, and again, I think the church bulletins were probably one of the proper contexts. But I've seen them with like construction logos, construction company logos. Mortgage companies use it. It's like a personal favorite font that happens to, I happen to be a real estate agent, and I want to use Papyrus for my logo. That's kind of like what happened. So
you mentioned the Native American thing, and that actually raises a point, because as I was doing, I'm aware of my own experience with Papyrus, right? I mean, just to let you in, I mean, on my first date with my now wife, it was a Sunday. We went to mass first before we got brunch and everything else. And, there's this beautiful little church in Pittsburgh where I grew up. It's St. Stanislaus. It's a traditional Polish church. Pope St. John Paul II prayed there when he visited Pittsburgh, and you can kneel on his altar and stuff. And I mean, the ceiling is coated with traditional Polish like war paintings, and the walls are coated with laminated placards of Papyrus. I mean, like literally it's just everywhere.
Laminated.
It's freaking everywhere. But then as I was researching other uses of this font, it didn't even occur to me that this would be ubiquitous in other people's faith traditions as well. I was reading, and I want to pull up to get his name right, but I was reading an article in First American Art magazine by a fellow called Roy Boney Jr. And he thankfully doesn't go after you at all for this, but he does get very kind of snipey, and perhaps rightfully so, where he says, this font has taken on the identity of a let's get back to nature vibe embraced by the New Agers and hippies. The book you saw at the gift shop that helps you find your Native American genealogy, the title is Papyrus. Or what about the t-shirt with the generic buckskin Indian maiden idling by the stream? That native pride text across the chest is more than likely written in papyrus. What about the flyer for the big powwow this weekend? Chances are Indian tacos is emblazoned on it somewhere in papyrus. And look, you could be, I mean, you're making the point, and I think this is certainly an ingredient in this, that some of the ubiquity here is based on the fact that if I'm scrolling through Microsoft Word, to the layman, to the non-graphic designer, all these fonts look exactly the same. And then they come across this really beautiful different one. And I think that we can't understate that is part of this. But I want to entertain a theory here. You're talking about the historicity of this font a lot. But is it possible, and Father Gabriel, I want you to weigh in on this too. I mean, I just want to talk about this for a second. Is it possible for an art form, and specifically like a subtle art form like a font, to just feel spiritual, to just connotate spirituality in a way that makes the Christian minister, the DRE in the Catholic Church, the Native American, independent books publisher, all these folks say, like, this speaks to something about what spirituality feels like, and I want to put that in there. And because the reason I want to ask the question is, we're sponsored by this group, Catholic Creatives, so I'll talk more about in a few minutes here. And so many of those designers, are bending over backwards to try to create art that evokes a spiritual response. And we can talk about the merits of that, till we're blue in the face. But you maybe kind of stumbled into just doing it for everyone universally. And if you did stumble into that, I think it deserves to be unpacked and explored a little bit. What do you think of that idea?
Wow. Well, for better or worse, it is what it is. It just that it came out of a kind of a spiritual awakening of my own, and it's true. It's I mean, I really think that was pretty much the context, and it seems appropriate for like you say, the other spiritual usages. I do see it a lot with the New Age groups and the even Indian, Hindu. I'd say worldwide. Yes, it's probably applicable to every kind of religious or spiritual group. But I honestly I haven't given it that kind of thought. I mean, it's something to think about, because yeah, there it is. And again, it's at the drop down menu. It is something that does stand out. Like you say, a lot of the fonts look the same. You get, there's only so much you can do with the serif font. There are a few novelty fonts that are included, but this one, Papyrus, just seems to it speaks to some people very strongly, and some people really love it and really want to utilize it. Others just they can't stand it. I mean, I remember I had a blog just for fun. I threw something up probably about 15 years ago, just to kind of open it up to see, it was like Papyrus, love it or hate it. What I wanted to pull people in to see what they thought. And it was literally 50-50. I mean, there was people that just they really loved it, and there was almost this bantering going back and forth between the commenters about, I mean, I would have people contact me literally from around the world just to write a paper on me and my development of the font, because they're infatuated with it, and then they'd show me their portfolio of work that they did with the font, with the usage, and but then there were others that just hated it, and they were just, how you can get online, you're anonymous, so you just let it all out, and it's like I had to shut it down because I was constantly having to moderate this noise and this craziness that it's like, okay, I don't need this. I mean, I appreciate the banter, but it got a little out of control, and I had to moderate and comment back, and I was engaging with some of these people, and it just got out of control, so I shut it down. And that's where it is. And that was 15 years ago. And like, I can't believe. Yeah.
It's just still rolling.
It's still there.
Yeah.
Father Gabriel, I want to actually get your thoughts on this idea too of like, can something just feel spiritual in that way? And maybe I'm full of crap, but I think it's an idea worth exploring. Before you get to that though, before I turn it over to you, I did a few minutes ago mention Catholic creatives, and I think this is probably a good time to pause and just give some light to them. We are at Created Things, the podcast brought to you, the listener, by both Catholic Creatives and Catholic Store. Catholic Creatives is actually a very cool organization. It's dedicated to igniting what they call a new renaissance of faith through prayer and beauty and the creative spirit. And to do this, they're connecting and supporting and promoting artists and innovators and makers and storytellers from kind of across the faith tradition. But it takes a community to bring these big ideas to life. So I invite you to discern supporting our Patreon. By doing so, you're not only helping this podcast, this very podcast that you're listening to, bring on guests like Chris Costello, but you're also directly contributing to future Catholic Creatives workshops, summits, resources meant to support Catholic artists around the country. And you'll be also getting an inside track on all of those activities as well, with access to our member-only Facebook group. I remember I was a very, very early kind of adopter, if you will, of Catholic Creatives myself. I was one of the first members, and when I got that invite to attend one of the first summits down in Texas, it was the craziest sort of Christian conference I've ever been to. I mean, it was like going to someone's bohemian wedding, and it just happened to be an artist's retreat. It was fantastic, and I would love for as many people to be able to participate in a future one of those as possible. So I again would encourage you guys to just prayerfully discern going over to catholiccreatives.org/support. And in addition, there you can find beautiful products from Catholic Creatives, makers, artisans, and artists at Catholic.store. Don't give your money away to big tech conglomerates or factories overseas. Support Catholic artists and small business locally by shopping at Catholic.store today. So without further ado, I mean, Father Gabriel, do you think this idea that I'm throwing out there holds any merit? I mean, part of me thinks, Chris, that you designed this font as kind of an expression of your own faith journey, and it's maybe that authenticity that's speaking to people, that your own spirituality is kind of coming through and people are taking up the spiritual baton. But again, maybe I'm pie in the sky full of crap. I mean, what do you think, Father?
This is something I want to press into, which is the way in which the script itself, a mode of writing, a typeface can, what does it evoke? How does it, these things like, a design choice like that, it poses questions, it answers questions, it opens certain doors, like it encourages you to look at things in certain ways. And I really do want to press on with that a little bit, to like look a little bit further into like specifically what Papyrus does with that. But these things do kind of begin to take on a life of their own, and that it isn't always connected with the whole broader context in which the thing exists. So like, for instance, like concretely speaking, you think like heavy black letter Gothic in the contemporary moment, and you think like, and you're if you're like a super kind of a certain kind of super Catholic, you're going to think like advertisements for the Latin Mass. If you're anybody else in the world, you're going to think death metal bands. There's nothing in between. If you think like Fraktur, you think Nazis, even though like Fraktur was like the way that people wrote in German in typeface for, whatever, 300 years plus. That was an extension of just the way that Gothic letter forms developed in the German-speaking part of, the realm and all these kinds of things. So so there's a way in which these things that like a kind of letter writing way of forming a letter can begin to like create its own evocations, create its own expectations from the viewer of the way, what they should be feeling, what they should be expecting when they're looking at it. But it's useful to point out that can also be deceptive, right? I mean, like, so working with medieval stuff, like you have to spend a lot of time getting used to manuscripts and all these kinds of things. And I work in the Carolingian period. And so you look at a Carolingian manuscript, like it just, it looks like, or especially like maybe like an Anglo-Saxon one, because it has this like very distinctive letter forms, and it looks like it communicates to you this very dramatic reality of like, especially if you don't read Latin, you just look at the page, it communicates this very strong like medieval Christianity, Bible commentary, like saints, all this kind of stuff. But if you can read it, like it might be like a recipe for alchemy. It might be like, it might be a piece of dirty poetry, or it could be anything, right? Like, so the point is like, that's what's so interesting about letter forms and typography, is that it can in fact represent anything, but the mind ends up, and then culturally we end up carving out of that potentially infinite anything, we end up carving out these smaller symbolic modes in which we expect this to communicate. So that's a thought, But I do kind of want to press on that, actually, because so here's a story from I have a very dear friend who she she's very interesting, very successful woman, and 9/11 happens, and she's just really
Any
torn up
story that
inside.
begins with 9/11 happens.
9/11
is gonna
happens.
be an
Yeah,
interesting
right.
story.
It's big, right? So she's really torn up. She's thinking and she's praying about these like the orphans, like the 9/11 orphans, and she's like thinking like, what can I do for them? What can I do for them? What can I do for them? This is a woman who hadn't written anything in much in her life, and she has this idea that she's gonna write like a book of poetry and give it to them, and if like she's a connected woman by complicated means, this ends up happening, and she writes this book of poetry. Like she sort of like teaches herself to write poetry, and she writes this book of sort of like inspirational poetry for 9/11 orphans that like connections, they distribute it to the 9/11 orphans, actually. Like, it really does. Every single word of this book, from the front cover to the Library of Congress page to the back imprint and all the poetry in between, is in Papyrus. Now
that's deep. Wow.
I just like, there is something here.
Mm-hmm.
how does this communicate? You know, like there's something dramatic about the way that this communicates, you know? And I agree with you that like, there is something about just the distinctiveness of the font. As you say, it's a novelty font. It catches the eye. It's different from just like the 1,000 different variations of Garamond or whatever. But I don't know. Do you have a sense like what, how does this font communicate? I guess that's my question. Like, how does it communicate? What does it communicate?
It must. It's got to grab people. I think it does. I think it grabs people in somewhere in a guttural sense or something inside, in order to motivate them to use it for whatever. So, I think it's unique. It seems. I mean, as a piece of as artwork, it's unique. It's to the point where it gets copied. I mean, there's pirated versions of not just the font being distributed, the actual Papyrus font, but very similar types of fonts that are obvious ripoffs. I mean, I can tell because there's a connection, you know, and that may be something too, because I can tell when I see when I see Papyrus, there's this, I don't know, something happens inside. It's like, oh, you know, there it is. It's like a reflection, again, from 1984 or whatever. You know, it's storied, but I can also tell when it's been copied and manipulated and reshaped and resold. It's like, I know exactly what I did with that letter A, and I know exactly where I put that, Nick, and there it is. I know that form, that curve, that swash. That's me. So, and that's the initial. That's the artist's creation, kind of speaking back to me, I suppose. But maybe in some way, other people who haven't created the font maybe get that same kind of, I don't know, like a human connection. Because I mean, it's calligraphy. It's not you know, computer generated. Well, it's not like it's very fluid and organic. You know, we know, you know, from history shows that, you know, when you're talking about even Roman chiseled fonts, those are created by human hands, but there's a perfection, a symmetry, a cleanness about it, a precise design. Whereas Papyrus is very, it's a hand lettering. It's a human form, and it's spontaneous. And I think I've captured that. Even though we've kind of had, you know, we made it into a digital product, it's still it retains the essence of human expression. And a very few fonts do that, I think. I mean, knowing other types of fonts and even, I mean, I'm a typographic enthusiast. I love typography. I love innovative designs. And I have other favorites, you know, and I'm honestly, Papyrus I did it for what it was, for its purpose. I can't say it's my favorite font, although it is my baby, you know, but there are all kinds of fonts out there that are just, you know, even the newer ones are just, it's beautiful, you know, innovative, artistic. Somebody really strategized with that one, you know, the kerning, the way they interlock with each other, each character. But there's something unique about Papyrus that I think millions of people tend to agree. So, and they run with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you make an interesting point, right? Because you know, we're starting off with this idea of, yeah, you scroll through and it just looks different, but why does it look different? Because of the humanity of it and the hand-doneness of it, and that inevitably is going to be spiritual. But I don't know. Maybe I'll just toss it over to the listener to pray about and consider. But you know, Father Gabriel and I on this podcast have talked a lot, or at least alluded to a lot, the difference between art, which is sort of by definition free of agenda, right? It allows you to react to it. As you react to it, you can love Papyrus or you can hate Papyrus with your whole self, right? Versus what I would call propaganda, or what Father Gabriel often refers to as being, emotionally manipulative, where I want a very specific point to come across. And I think the problem, if I can be so bold, with a lot of quote unquote Christian art is that it falls into the latter category. It's very agended. And from everything you're saying, you sat down and you didn't seek to just create like the Jesus-y font or the spiritual font because you want people to use it that way. You sought to create a free expression of where you were at spiritually at that point, and it just happened to touch something in some people. And I think that's really indicative of what successful art does.
Yeah. Because it was very spontaneous. It was simply a handwritten font, a handwriting that I just happened to gear in this direction, not a political direction or religious direction. It was just what I was feeling at the time, and I don't know. It just the like I said, the elongated ascenders and descenders, and the kind of a little bit of a extended quality of the character itself. That was just it was a factor of, this is where I'm at now. This is what I'm feeling now. This is, how, design and art is actually, it's therapeutic. When you create, you feel like you're somehow living up to your purpose. You're channeling something out. And it's hard to pinpoint even what the feeling is, but I'm trying to dig deeper here, but it's just it happened. That's what my hand and that's what my mind was working on at the moment. And again, I was thinking in terms of like I said, the illustrative or the illuminated manuscripts, what I had known from my study of history, but I wanted something fresh and new, so this was my contribution to whatever I guess spiritual direction this was heading.
If I can interject, one of the other things, Chris, that you did mention earlier, that you alluded to, is in addition to all the people we're talking about who love it and resonate with Papyrus, awful lot of people who hate it to frankly a weird degree. We live in a time where hating something can very much be the basis of your whole identity. So that's not surprising. But I mean, it has sort of become enough of a part of the zeitgeist that, even as you mentioned, I mean, it made it on SNL, right? And I mean, how, you're successful as an artist if you get parodied by Weird Al or you end up on SNL. I mean, it's just there it is, right? And this is something that I, as an artist, have experienced before. I mean, one of my worst experiences as an artist was when a guy who was like basically a consultant to a company I was branding, I hadn't liked the brand. The company liked the brand. He hadn't liked the brand. He ended up posting the brand to this like designers review board, not telling anyone that he'd been involved in the process, and being like, doesn't this brand suck? Doesn't this logo suck? And just got like all these people just say awful stuff to be able to basically go back and prove his point to the company. And you mentioned, how cruel people can be online, but I would argue that we have a responsibility as artists, especially as Christian artists, to do better and to be a little bit more self-aware in terms of providing critique or offering our opinion, especially when, as in your case with Papyrus, hey guys, the design's done, so there's no such thing as constructive criticism at this point. I'm not going to go back and recreate Papyrus, right? And I mean, can you just talk about your own experience on that side of it, and also what advice you'd maybe have to any artist who has been kind of pseudo crucified that way for their art and their shit unfairly?
Yeah. Well, I've learned you have to defend your art. You have to defend your voice. And again, with the proliferation of this, the social media thing, and again, anonymous people can get up there and just vent and just really crucify people. It's no wonder you got such anxiety issues with younger people dealing with this kind of this level, this type of social engagement. And yeah, I've experienced it. And I'm talking crazy. I'm talking like when Avatar first came out, and they used the papyrus or derivative of it for the title, and they used it for the alien speak, the subtitles. I found somewhere that somebody wanted to kill me because of it.
Oh my God.
No, you're not serious.
No, I'm serious. I'm actually serious. And then I'm like, what is this? And I mean, I took it like, I I found out who the guy was, and I got as much profile information on him as I could, and I have photos of him. The guy, he was kind of a moron because he's just one of those, hey, I know who you are. But I stayed in I don't know. It was probably one of those, bold kind of idiot things that people do because they feel empowered. But and then other people kind of chimed in and kind of found out where I lived and posted a map. But it wasn't me. It was another Chris Costello that lives. And I know this person. It's like, what is the matter with these people? So there was a little bit of concern, but then there was like, whoa, I guess this is where I need to take it up to the next level to defend what I do and be an artist and realize to whatever extreme that people aren't going to agree with you. I think the more you put stuff out there that, I mean, it's not even controversial. It's like, it's not even a political or religious.
Yeah, you didn't paint it in blood.
No. I mean, I ruined somebody's Avatar experience, the movie or whatever. I don't know. It's
hey, James Cameron ruined somebody's Avatar experience. Okay, that movie is a debacle. All right, let's just be honest.
but yeah, it's like, first of all, it's like, all right, there's some pretty nuts. There's crazy people out there that whatever. It's just, this is gonna happen. If you put yourself out there, maybe this is my advice to artists. You're an artist, all right? So you're gonna put yourself out there, and people are gonna see your work, and they're gonna comment, But I think it was Bill Maher that said something to the effect of talking about people who critique others. It's like, hey, you didn't design it the way I wanted to, or I would have if I had talent. You've got these kinds of critiques out there that they're coming from out of the woodwork, ragging on your work. But hey, I'm the one who did it. What are you doing? I'm the one who spent months developing this thing and got all these rejection letters that told me, I interpreted it like, oh, I guess it's no good. It's nothing. I'm not a great, I'm not a typographer at all. You go through this development and building of your own character, and you finally get it to the point where, all right, here's the art for the world. And then you got the commenters, you got the haters. They're just, I mean, I get it with everything. You get that. Some of the coin designs, some of the.
There are people who get that pissed off about coins.
Yeah, there's microcosms of interests. That it's there are these narrow groups of people that are just offended by an interpretation or all the time. I mean,
oh man, don't offend the numismatists, man. They're out there. They're out there. They're ready to rage. That's right. That's right. Yeah. They know how Google Maps works.
Yep. So I mean, this is it. I mean, it's like, this is, if you want to be a creative and you want to have influence over many, worldwide reach, international reach, whatever, it's going to happen. You have to learn how to toughen up with it, and stay strong. I mean, you're the creator, you're the creator. Just keep creating. Don't stop, so.
But would you say, I mean, do you think it's too far of me to say that that's also a symbol that it's good art? Like, if everybody sort of universally likes something, or alternatively universally just doesn't care about something, then it's probably not very good art,
Mm-hmm.
or very effective at the very least, to use design school terminology. But you have something that people like passionately love and put all over their worship spaces, the most vulnerable part of their life, and something that people say, I want to kill you, or maybe at least myself, over. I mean, you're basically creating the design version of a crusade, it seems to me. And that seems to me like to indicate that it's good art. And is that a comfort? Is that a cold comfort that artists offer themselves?
I think it is, because I mean, I can critique it unbiased. I can give an unbiased critique of the thing. I look at it, and I think I created it with purpose. I like it. I think it's well designed. I think it's extremely unique. There's nothing out there like it except the copies that people have, pirated. Really, there's nothing comes close, and I just say that, I guess, with pride in the kind of the face of those who critique it, and even especially some of the designers, graphic designers, who go off on it. I'd have to ask them. I mean, how many fonts have you designed that are that commercially successful?
It's hard. It's really hard. I've never designed a font because it's so. Yeah. I mean, just the math level alone with the kerning and tracking and
then you get into
X
the
heights, and I'm too intimidated.
Yeah. I mean, I designed 5, I believe, at this point. And actually, interestingly, another font called Blackstone. I don't know if you've kind of perused the website. There's another kind of a very medieval, very focused, almost Dungeons and Dragons type of font that was clearly meant for blacksmith shops, or 12th century manuscripts. That had this very similar brush stroke. I think I used the same pens.
Right.
Very similar rustic, textured character to it, and a little bit of Old English, and that was, again, it was another expression of not so much maybe a spiritual inspiration, but it's like I was into dragons at the time. I was into the history. I think this looks cool, and it's kind of different, and it's kind of more vertical, and it's just fun, And again, the curves and the textures, that took a lot of time to pull together, as much time as Papyrus did, and it won a type design award, and it too became the transfer lettering press type thing, and went that route. And then I ended up, because I own the rights to it, I ended up digitizing it on my own, and I created it and digitized it in Fontographer, which is a font creation software. That takes so much time and thinking and like I say, strategizing, because it is very strategic where you place those points. So I'm not gonna take criticism lying down. It's like, I mean, I do have to say to the haters, it's like, what have you done, that has that level of reach, So. And I, sometimes I wonder, is there jealousy involved or whatever? Maybe a little bit. I don't know. But I just do what I do, and I live with the what do you want to
with
call
both
it? Feedback.
sides?
Yeah, both sides. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And one thing that strikes me, so that makes a lot of sense, seeing the way that you sort of have to learn to receive these things. But it's also worth pointing out that, like, one of the fascinating things about font as a mass marketed reality is the way in which, now this is obviously a minority of people, but like, typography nerds, whatever, like when you see them in the wild, so to speak, you form an automatic kind of relationship with the thing in which you find it, so like in a certain way. So what, for instance, like every time I see some random merch that's like in Zapfino, I know, like, okay, so this guy like made this on a Mac, right? Like it's like a Mac proprietary thing, and like it kind of puts you in a context of like a whole world, like a certain thought world, especially some years ago when that had more of a kind of like self-conceived identity with it and stuff like that. It's like, okay, well, so I know like the kind of some of the thought world that this designer was working in when he made this thing, you know. And I mean, I have to tell you, Chris, like I am one of these like OG kind of papyrus finders from like way back. I mean, 15 years plus. I mean, I have one of my best friends. All around the world, whenever we find papyrus, we take photographs and send it to each other. And it just forms this like it's like I automatically have this like bond with it. You know, I'm like. You could map a decline and fall of edible arrangements from when they dropped papyrus, you know. Such
we have
what
one
the
of those
heck?
stores down the road,
Yeah, dude. And I mean, like, yeah, you know, but like this is I recognize like I'm speaking here as like a typography nerd for whom like papyrus particularly caught my eye like way back. But there is something funny about that, like beautiful funny. I mean, about the way that like we have this like. Because these are all available like on our computer screens, like whether it's, you know, just like Word drop down menus or whether you have InDesign or whatever, like it's like we have all of these kind of private languages to communicate with each other. They're sending certain kind of symbols, certain kind of signals, you know, that like I get a kind of a connection, a certain emotional and visual and conceptual relationship with something when I see it's in papyrus, as opposed to when I see that it's like be like, oh man, bro is like abusing Charlemagne again, you know, and like all this kind of stuff.
Wingdings.
It's like very rarely do you get companies who are bold enough to name to use the font Wingdings for their company, you know. But I guess yeah, there is something funny about like the mass availability, you know. Like let me just put it like if I could just put it in like a kind of medieval context, would be like you know, a scriptorium in a monastery from the beginning of Christian writing. They receive this from like the Roman tradition of writing, is that they want to have a consistent hand, like a consistent hand for a scriptorium, so it doesn't like so you could say like a script, you know, that every
consistency of brand in a modern
like a consistency of brand kind of thing, you know. So like you can tell that that this manuscript, and you open it up, if you can't speak Latin at all, you can tell it was written in Luxoi because it looks like it's the Luxoi script, you know. And it doesn't matter, like only then a real expert will be able to recognize individual writers writing the Luxoi script, you know, in the Luxoi scriptorium, or like, you know, Lindisfarne or whatever. Like so you get this kind of thing where anywhere in the world you open it up and you have a certain kind of relationship that, you know, like there was a monk in Luxoi in like 690 and he was doing, and like and he was being trained to write this kind of a way. It just strikes me that there is this very particular way in which a lettering of font like opens up a certain kind of relationship, more than just conveying information, and more than just conveying emotion. It opens up a certain relationship with the place, with the person, with the world around it.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned about the monks. When I was doing this papyrus, I was kind of tucked away in my garage space, my studio, and I had envisioned, again, it's just random thoughts as I'm thinking and you know, doing the structure of papyrus. I thought, I kind of feel like a monk right now almost. I feel like I'm and I thought about like what they do. They're the training that they had to go through with calligraphy and with understanding all the elements of typography to the point where they can, and modern calligraphers do this as well. They're so advanced in knowledge and practice, is that with one stroke they can make a beautiful swirls that just end up where they need to be, and it's almost like it's a miracle. I'm personally not at that level. I've not explored calligraphy to that degree, but to some, a little bit of it made me feel like this must have been what a monk felt like. I was talking to nobody for hours, and I was just, doing my work, and somehow, maybe, I don't know, feeling led by led by the Spirit in some way. I just had that random connection. I remember thinking about it at one moment. So, but I know we've been talking about this. Yeah, it's there is a human connection that I had, and somehow I cannot explain it. I know we could probably, as we drill down and discuss it further, there's something human and spiritual about it, and maybe that's why it stirs. I think it does stir either an admiration or a deep reviling of it. It does something to everybody's spirit who sees it. And that's a way to look at it. So
well, and that's, I would say again, I mean, I think that's what good art does. And when you talk about the human connection, I love the visual of you sitting there in your, Steve Jobs style garage, connecting your experience to the experience of a monk. And I think that's one of the things that we as artists, we as creatives, makers don't maybe think about as often as we should. In Catholicism, there is this idea of apostolic succession, right? That in theory, you could, if you wanted to take the time, meet any priest, and you could trace back the priest who laid hands on him to the priest who laid hands on him to the priest who laid hands on him, all the way back to Jesus laying hands on one of the disciples and making them a priest, right? And so every priest can sort of trace his spiritual genealogy, so to speak. And I think there's something to be said artistically there too. When you're sitting there across time, you might not know each other's names, but you are sharing a kinship and an experience with that 3rd century monk, and with the 23rd century tech bro who's trying to create, whatever font we're reading on the metasphere or whatever it is by that time. And that's a really cool universal thing. And I don't know. I mean, yes, we have to occasionally deal with doxing and murder threats and stuff like that because of the human connection and everything. But I don't know. There's something really beautiful in that kind of cross-time connection that art and being an artist allows for. Yeah. Any final thoughts on just that idea before we wrap up?
That is a great final thought when I think, wow, yes, there is a connection with artists and creators throughout the course of human history. We're all experimenting and all dealing with our current time and our current conflicts and loves and experiences. Yes, there's a connection with the calligrapher in 15th century Rome. I never thought about that, but it's like, yeah. And then you look to the future, we're kind of building something now that people are going to be looking back at with some form of admiration or inspiration. So yeah, it's kind of cool to be a part of a lineage of creators that hey, we've got our time and our place is right here and now. So with this one life we have, let's just create, and love what we've been blessed to do.
I literally could not have said it better myself. I don't think if I had a million years. So thank you for ending us on that note. If you guys want to learn more, you listeners at home want to learn more about Chris, you can find out more about him and his beautiful work at chriscostello.design. You can also, as I mentioned, support the podcast and future missions and resources by going to catholiccreatives.org/support, or even purchase kick-ass goods via catholic.store. So lots of great links to check out. But as Chris is saying, let's really embrace that cross-time experience of being an artist. And with that spirit, we invite you to go forth and create cool things.
You've been listening to Creative Things, a podcast of Catholic creatives, hosted by Father Gabriel Torretta OP and Jacob Flores Popczak, produced by Jessica Flores Popczak and Kyle Meineke. To find out more about how you can support the podcast and other ventures for artists, visit catholiccreatives.org/support.